To turn the slides, just the computer, is that what it is? Yeah? Okay, all right, cool, very much. All right, so good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me here for the second time, which is a great pleasure and privilege. And as I was studying this morning, I couldn't help remembering a talk that I watched once at IBM in Brazil. The director of HR, he came and he was going to talk to us from my department, and he brought a bunch of books and binders, and he said, you know, the number of books and papers that you bring to a talk is proportional to the level of insecurity of the person that's talking. So this is more or less the level of insecurity that I have today, but I hope to have a good conversation with you guys. Yeah. So the subject that we have today is one of my favorite for two reasons. First of all, I love astronomy. That's one of the things that I always loved since early ages. I always liked movies about it, information about it. And also, the other thing that I really like, it's my preferred gospel, is the Gospel of John. So these are two things that will be present in our conversation today, and we will make sense to it as we go. So you might be asking, all right, I came here today to hear about the gospel of Jesus, and Marcos is talking about astronomy and his preferences. We will make sense to it in a bit, yeah? So as I mentioned, one of the things that I really liked was astronomy. I wanted to see a UFO. I wanted to be abducted. I wanted to have that kind of experience. But it never happened, right? So I have to believe on the stories that other people tell. But one of the things that I always used as a reference for me when I was younger was Cosmos from Carl Sagan. They have a new edition of Cosmos now. I haven't seen that one yet, but it brings a lot of information about the universe. And I was so curious about it that at age 21, I actually read the book and got some interesting information there. And you must be thinking, okay, this guy's a nerd. Yeah, I was a little bit of a nerd, but I think, you know, this curiosity brought me some very good information. But I would like to invite you now to a nerdy exercise, yeah? And I'm going to ask you if you know how many galaxies do we have in the universe? What is the latest number that scientists are working with? Does anybody know? 2 billion. Do we have any other guess? Trillions, right? So here's the number. They are working with the number of 2 trillion galaxies in the universe. All right? Okay, but we have our own galaxy, right? Which one is that galaxy? Do we know the name? It's the Milky Way. So the next question I have for you is, how many stars do you believe we have in the Milky Way? No guesses? Trillions? Well, not that many. We have an estimated of 100 billion stars in our galaxy. Okay? All right, we're getting closer. So this is our solar system, one of the systems that we have in the Milky Way, right? And we have 9 planets, 8 depending on who you ask, right? So here they are. So let's do this quick exercise. As we look at the universe, if we were to, and here's the part that I forgot to turn the pages in. I'll get there. There you go. So let's do this math quickly, right? And do 2 trillion galaxies times 100 billion stars. Just for facilitation, let's think that each of them have 9 planets. How many possible planets do we have out there? Try to say this number. Just try to say it. And I'm not considering the moons, right? There are many moons out there that could be inhabited as well. So did I get your attention in terms of how many inhabited planets we could have out there? And this is the observable universe. Observable. What does that mean? What is the observable universe? That we can see. Because as the universe is expanding, the further you go, the faster these galaxies are expanding. They are traveling. So it gets to a limit where these galaxies are moving so fast that are moving faster than the speed of light. So their light will never reach us. We only know they exist by calculations. And I'm not going to get into that. That's too nerdy. So, are there reasons for us to believe that this unimaginable thing was created just for our entertainment? That we will just look at the skies and, oh my God, thank you for doing this all for me, right? When we think about the fact that we have galaxies out there that we can't even see, this thought doesn't make any sense anymore, right? We understand that this universe was not made just for our contemplation. But this knowledge that we just shared, that we just spoke, is quite recent, right? These numbers are from the past decade, yeah? In medieval times, people thought that the universe was geocentric, right? Geocentric meaning the Earth was the center of the universe. That was the belief that people had back then. One guy, a Polish guy of all places, came to change that, right? His name was Copernicus. Copernicus came with a different approach, and in 1540, Brazil had already been discovered, right? 1540, he came ahead and said, no, the sun is the center of the universe. We gravitate around it. He died 3 years later for his luck, because his followers had a very difficult time doing that. Oops, sorry. The first follower that we're going to discuss is this guy, Giordano Bruno. Giordano Bruno came ahead, and in 1548, he said, I agree with Copernicus, right? He was a philosopher, a poet, an astronomer, and he also proposed that the stars were surrounded by other planets. He also came ahead and said, these planets could have life. He also said that the universe was probably infinite. And we kind of agree with that, right? And but he did other things. He questioned eternal damnation. He said, I don't believe we go to hell. I don't believe in heaven and hell. He said, I don't believe in the virginity of Mary. And he also preached the reincarnation of the soul. Guess what happened to him? He was burned alive in 1600. Yeah? This means that 4 centuries ago we would be in trouble. Right? So that is the first guy that I wanted to talk about as people that changed the way we think about it. But there's a guy that is more important for our conversation today, which is Galileo Galilei. And why is Galilei more important? So he was also Italian, right? Born in Pisa, 1564. He was an astronomer, a physicist, engineer, and he is considered the father of the observational astronomy. Why? Because he had a telescope, an innovation at that time, right? Supporting Copernicus, he met the opposition of the church as well, and the Roman Inquisition. We only speak about the Spanish Inquisition, but there was an Italian Inquisition as well, right? Forced him to take his ideas back. He had to say, okay, no, just kidding. But he was put in house arrest and died forgotten, right, at his time. However, they were able to shut him down when he was alive, but they were not able to shut his spiritual voice. And he actually gave a very interesting contribution to the Genesis. He has a whole chapter. I don't know if you're going to be able to read this here, but the whole chapter 6 of the Genesis was dictated by Galileo. right? The medium was Camille Flammarion. And all these titles here, right, speak about space, time, the planets, etc., etc. And in the last chapter, there is a very interesting part that reads the following. Do not conclude that the millions and millions of Earths that float in the spatial expanse are similar to this one. Far from it. They differ according to the diverse conditions that have been assigned to them and according to their respective roles in the scenario of the universe. So, first thing, right, those X numbers of planets that we saw not necessarily obey the same laws of nature that we do here. Nature, consequently, and life manifests in other forms, other ways. So when we read that the respective roles of this planet, we understand that everything that God created has a purpose, right? These things are not just there for our entertainment. These creations of God have a purpose, each one of them. And we will talk more about these purposes in a minute, but I'm going to give you a break about astronomy, okay? I'm going to stop talking about now. Don't worry, no more astronomy. We're good. I'm going to transition to the other thing that I like very much, which is the Gospel of John. And let's understand first, right, why the Gospel of John, why the Gospel of John is so important, and why it is unique. The reason I like it so much is because the Gospel of John is unique. When we look in retrospect, the history of how the Bible was assembled first time, this was in the late 300s, beginning of 400s, and it was led by Saint Jerome, right? He was the first one that led this effort to put together the Old and the New Testament, right? The Old Testament, 39 books that were in Hebrew, and the New Testament, 27 books that were in Greek. So everything had to be translated to Latin. So the first Bible was assembled back then. And there were many Gospels that didn't make the cut, right? We don't only have the 4. We have many other Gospels that were considered not legitimate, and they are considered apocryphal. They were not included in the Bible. The 4 that were included, as you know well, Luke, Matthew, Mark, and John, they are the canonical, right? But the 3, Luke, Matthew, and Mark, are considered very similar. They more or less talk about the same passages. They kind of contemplate the same thing. John is unique. John has many passages that are not found in any other gospel, and I'm going to tell you some of them. The first thing that is only in the Gospel of John is 3 considered miracles, right? Jesus turning water into wine. His very first one is only found in the Gospel of John. Walking on water, that very important passage, right? That provoked many changes in the apostles or disciples back then, is only also in the Gospel of John. A very important passage as well, raising Lazarus from the dead, or whatever we want to call it, right? I don't think he was coming back in either situation. So Jesus calling Lazarus back is only in the Gospel of John. But there are always also some important encounters that only are mentioned in the Gospel of John. One that I like very much is the Samaritan woman at the well. So when Jesus stops at the well, the disciples go to the city to buy stuff or food or whatever they need. And this woman comes, right, a Samaritan woman, and has a very interesting conversation with Jesus. And that's the first time that he actually announces himself as the Messiah outside of his inner circle, right? Only the Gospel of John. The washing of the disciples' feet. This is one of my favorite passages of all time, because this is the moment where Jesus is actually sending a very strong message to the disciples. My leadership is a servant leadership, right? We have to serve. And I truly believe that this only made sense to them after Jesus passed the baton and said, now it's your turn to spread the gospel. And that's when they understood the message, right? We have to be servants. And I think that was a milestone in Jesus' preaching. And the other one that I consider very important, and also is only on the Gospel of John, is the famous conversation with Nicodemus. Right? This is not mentioned anywhere else. And this is where Jesus spells it out that we have to be born again to get to his kingdom that is not from this world. So you start understanding why the Gospel of John is so interesting, right? He also has the 7 I am declarations, right? Jesus says, I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. I am the door. I am the good shepherd. I am the resurrection and the life. I am the way, the truth, and the life. And the 7th one, I am the true vine. All these 7 statements, right, are only found in the Gospel of John. Something else that is only found in the Gospel of John is what brings us here today, right? Only John passes this on his Gospel. Jesus telling them, I am the Father's house. In my Father's house, there are many dwelling places, or mansions, depending on the translation you see. If not, I would have told you, I am going away to prepare a place for you. So this is a very interesting moment, right? And let's situate this when this thing is said. Let's contextualize this conversation, right? This is said in the Last Supper, which is one of the most important milestones of Jesus, right? It's his last week, his last conversations with the disciples. And what he is doing in this conversation most of the time is he's telling them, I'm going away. I'm not going to be physically present with you guys for very long. Please understand this, because you're going to have to continue this, right, after I am physically gone. He's preparing the disciples for that, and he had already done the washing of the feet. He had already told Peter that he would deny him 3 times, and he had already sent Judas out, right? Because he just told him, go do what you got to do. And Judas was not there anymore. Judas didn't hear this conversation, right? So at that time, when Jesus said that, right, the knowledge about space and other planets was minimum, especially among the disciples. So did they really understand what Jesus was telling them? Probably not, right? So one very interesting thing about this passage, and I have read the Gospel, the original, a couple of times in different translations. And in both translations that I have in my house, not translations but versions, they don't have anything on the footnotes explaining these words. Yeah? So even in the original Bible, right, in the original Gospel, there is no explanation of many dwelling places, my Father's house. Nobody elaborates on this. But here comes the spirits to rescue us, right? So the first place that we're going to check this is the Spirit's book. And there are like 4 questions in sequence. I'm bringing just 3, right? And the very first question that Kardec and the mediums ask, are all the globes spinning through space inhabited? And the spirits are categorical, right? Peremptorial. Yes. And contrary to what earthlings believe, they themselves are far from being first in intelligence, goodness, and perfection. So these spirits put us in our place, right? Pretty much. Be humble, because out there are better people than you, smarter people than you, and more perfect. Nevertheless, there are individuals who think they know the whole truth of the matter, and imagine that this little planet is the only one privileged enough to be inhabited by reasoning beings. We saw the number. We saw the number. This doesn't make any sense, right? This is pride and vanity. They fancy that God has created the universe only for us, right? We do. 56. Is the physical composition of all the different globes the same? And they also say the same thing. No, they do not resemble one another at all. Same thing that Galileo said. Since the physical composition of all the various worlds is not the same, do the beings inhabiting them have a different physical organization? Yeah, of course, just as fishes and birds, right, have on your planet. So this is a game changer, right? It is spelled out clearly that there are more inhabited worlds out there. Let's transition to the Gospel according to Spiritism. And here comes a very important guy to talk about it for us, right? St. Augustine. St. Augustine, let's talk about him a little bit because I think he's a very iconic, very important figure. He was born in 354. Let me repeat that. It's not 1,354. It's 354, right? In the very beginning of Christianity, yeah? And he was the bishop of Hippo. Hippo was located in the North Africa, but it was Roman Empire yet, okay? So he was living in a part that was still Roman Empire, and he is considered the most significant Christian thinker after Paul. So think about this, right? Paul is considered like the second guy in Christianity after Jesus. And St. Augustine is considered right after Paul. So this is how relevant he is. And he created a powerful theological system. He shaped biblical studies and interpretation, helped lay foundation of modern Christianity thought. One of the very important things he did, and this is kind of like a side story, right? How many here have noticed that there are two versions of the Christians' 10 Commandments? Aha. So if you Google this, you will find that we have two versions, the Catholic version and the Protestant version, right? And the Protestant version is more faithful to the original. The original in the Bible it appears in two books, the Exodus and the Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy is, I don't know if the pronunciation is correct, but that's the second book, right? And they are not numerated. If you read them in the original, right, they are just mentioned as the laws of God, right? And this effort of putting them into a group of 10 came like centuries later. And one of the guys that worked on this was St. Augustine. And the original is very emphatic about images, not adoring images, right? And it groups on the last law or rule the coveting of other people's possessions, right? The original, sorry ladies, but the original includes women in possessions, right? That's what women were at those times. So the last commandment is telling that you should not covet other people's possessions in general. St. Augustine thought that this should be open in two, right? He said there are material temptations and there are, what's the word? Let's use sexual for other words, temptations. So he separated in two. And that's why in the Catholic version, we have, you should not covet your neighbor's wives, right? But in the Protestant version, this commandment doesn't exist, right? We only have the 10th saying, you shall not covet other people's possessions, right? But in the beginning, right, in the second or third, I don't remember now, the original version and the Protestant version is very clear about images, right? You shall not adore images. And that's why Protestant churches don't have statues or pictures or anything like that, right? They follow the basic, the original, yeah? And the Catholics kind of like put that together with you shall not have other gods. And that one kind of disappeared. Rumor has it that the Romans, when they were accepting Christianity and then making it official, they didn't like that rule because they were adoring images all the time, right? So they will not change that habit. But there is nothing documenting that. It's just a speculation. Yeah? So St. Augustine has a key role on listing those 10 commandments in that order that we're used to see it. That's how important he was. And again, this was in the late 300s, early 400s. Yeah? So why are we talking so much about St. Augustine? Because in the Gospel, according to Spiritism, in chapter 3, he is the one that has all the Spirit's instructions, right? That's the value that he brings. And St. Augustine has a number of contributions in our literature from Spiritism, right? So what does he say in those comments? He says that Father's house is that universe that we saw, right? And the dwelling places or dimensions are the planets. So it's not that we have many mansions or many dwelling places. We have that number we saw. It's an infinite number of places, right? They offer home to spirits depending on their level. Yeah? When the spirits reach a given level, they may go to the next type of planet that we will discuss in a minute. He says that the Earth is just a small globe that concentrates a tiny fraction of incarnated spirits. And he mentions, he kind of breaks it out for us to facilitate understanding the 5 levels of planets that we have. And then we'll talk about these 5 levels briefly, right? So the first level is the primitive world. He says that compared to Earth, these are behind us, right? These planets are more primitive than us. In Earth, we still find people that are transitioning from primitive to the level that we are. So that's why we see some things that we see in our planet still. In those planets, people are, the inhabitants are rustic and unbeautiful. Again, words coming from the gospel, not mine. Instinctive, not intentionally good. They have no sense of justice. Who guesses what is the law in those worlds? Brutal force, right? That's the word he uses. So in the primitive worlds, we still have brutal force as the law. And I can't help thinking of some Hollywood movies that we watch, right? Where the hero beats up everybody, right? And he's all the strong guy and etc. This is our primitive side talking, right? I watched a very interesting docuseries on Netflix called Chimp Empire. Has anybody seen this? Chimp Empire. This is worth watching, right? This is they hid cameras in a pack of chimpanzees, right? And they started observing how they behave. Yeah? And one thing that caught my attention so much was the alpha male and the way that the alpha male behaves, right? Just out of the blue, if he feels that his leadership is threatened, right? He starts running in the middle of the pack like crazy, breaking branches, screaming, and hitting his head on trees and his leg on trees, like beating the trees up just to impress people. And if a chimp baby is on his way, trouble. He doesn't even see them. He's in a choleric way, just, doing a power play, a power, what's the word to use? Power something. So he's just a power display. There you go, right? So when I saw this, I started remembering soccer players celebrating a goal. It was the same thing, right? Same movements, same stuff. Football players, like hitting each other and with the head. Guys, that's our primitive world, primitive side speaking, right? Power displays could be anything, right? Before those football games, war airplanes pass by, right? Showing how mighty, how strong this country is. That's a power display. So we have to learn to recognize those kinds of language, symbolic language that we don't see. So we still have a lot of primitive in us. In those words, no industry or inventions, just seek to satiate basic needs, right? The more basic needs you have to satiate, more primitive you are. Vague intuition of a superior being. So also in our past, right, we had many gods. We had gods for everything, right? Anything that was out of my control, I would have a God for it, right? So this is where they are now. And they are considered spiritual children by St. Augustine. So that's the first level. The second level is our level, trials and expiations, or trials and atonement, depending on the translation you see. So we already have a different level of intelligence. We have a different level of expression to art and engineering. We have a more advanced level of intelligence. However, look how interesting, huh? We still need the contrasts to interpret and understand the world around us. We need evil to perceive good. We need disease to value health. We need the dark to admire light. So we are still learning to discern those things, right? Our vices are still a clear sign of imperfection. We have both trials and expiations, and I think it's opportune that we differentiate them, right? My expiations are God telling me, learn this lesson the hard way, right? You're going to suffer, you're going to have pain, you're going to have difficulties, but you're going to have to learn this lesson. The trials is, did you learn it? Let's see if you really learned it, right? It's going to put you to test over and over. And if I do my expiation and I pass the trials, then I can evolve spiritually. In this level of worlds, we still have to fight against perversity of our own and inclemency of nature. Those two things will work me on different levels, one in the heart and the other one in the brain, right? On the emotions and in intelligence, to go over these challenges. And if the primitive was considered the children, we are the teenagers, we're the rebels, right? I don't agree with this. Oh, I have a different idea, right? That's what teenagers do. That's what we do. Well, let's move to the third level, which is the one that we are aspiring to get eventually, which are the worlds of regeneration. So these are considered transition worlds, right? We are kind of like ready to be tested and evolve to something better. Now, there are two interesting things that is said in the gospel that I have to call the attention to. It's considered the calm after the storm. We are the storm. We are in the storm right now. So the regeneration worlds are the calm after the storm, right? And he also says is the convalescence after illness. So in this level, spiritually speaking, we are still ill, right? And we will be convalescing when we get to the worlds of regeneration. Souls who repent or evolve find calm and rest to purify themselves in those worlds. We are still subject to the laws of matter. We still have to reincarnate in those worlds. In those worlds, love is practiced by all. So imagine, we have signs, right? We have moments here where we are starting to transition to that. This one is interesting, and he raises eyebrows. In those worlds, we have equity in social relations. Now, how do we compare equity to equality? Right? I had this curiosity and I said, this is not the same thing. Let me understand this better. And once you do some research, one example spoke very strong to me. Let's say that we have two people trying to see over a wall, but they have different heights, right? Equality is I give them a solution the same size. I give them two boxes, same level. Oops, I did it again, didn't I? Two boxes. The tall guy will be able to jump into it and see on the other side, but the short guy won't be able to. Equity is giving two different solutions, two different sizes of boxes, so both can see over the wall. Now think about this, right? And again, I invite you to think how primitive we are sometimes. We are having the first initiatives like this today in society, right? Everywhere we go. But there is still a lot of prejudice against it, right? We think that we are giving privilege to people, right? That we are differentiating the treatment. Yes, we are. When we get to that level of world, that's going to be normal. But we are still resisting that because of our primitive, egotistical side. Yeah, for our reflection. All seeking God by following His laws, very happy compared to earth, there are still trials, but no more expiations. Okay, this is very curious, very interesting. So we still have trials, but no expiations. Man is fallible and still evolving. Let's go to number 4. The blissful and happy worlds. Now, let me invite you to think about this. Let's say you're driving to a place that you haven't been before, and you drove half the way. And then you stop for a drink or something, and then somebody asks, how is the way going forward to your destination? Are you going to be able to answer that? You haven't been there yet. So we are only able to kind of see backwards, right? So we are kind of trying to understand that world, and that's why these words from St. Augustine are very helpful, right? Only by purifying and elevating we get a glimpse of what these worlds are. Very high moral standards. Only moral superiority matters. Creatures there are beautified, perfected, and purified. The bodies no longer suffer the needs and diseases or deterioration that we experience now. More perceptive senses, lighting appearance. This kind of brought me back to many statements about beings of light that we're seeing throughout history, right? So we were being visited probably by very high-level spirits that had light, more light than we do, right? And that's a characteristic of spirits that are in that level. Longer life and shorter childhood. Longevity is proportional to the degree of advancement of the worlds. Death is seen as a happy transition. Imagine how far we are from that yet, right? Of course, no wars, no slaves. Man seeks to elevate himself, not to elevate above others. So we're not competing. We're working to improve ourselves. No hatred, no jealousy, no envy. The strong support the weak. What else? No one suffers from necessities. And these are not worlds of privileged people who got there, got by merit, right? They went through all the things that we are going through now, and that's why they are there. They deserved to be there. They built the bridge to get there, right? And finally, the last one, so we can move on, the celestial or divine. Pure spirits, those who have attained perfection. That's what we have in that level. They are not bound to a fixed place or to a planet. They are moving around. They are helping other planets. They are building other planets. They are helping people evolve, like Jesus in our world. That's an example, right? A very good example. And it's hard to see that the guys that are here were once there. But that's our evolutionary path, right? When we see an adult, it's hard to understand how it was a baby once, right? Same comparison here. One thing he also mentions, and I think we can understand this by seeing this map, right, is that the worlds are progressing. And I saw that you guys have a study every Sunday right before this, right? Probably this is the type of discussion that you guys have there. Progress is the law of nature because nothing is stationary. All beings of creation are subject by the goodness of God, who wants everything to prosper, including the planets. Planets have their cycle. They are created, they mature, they die. Earth was once inferior, right? Now we are here, and we are transitioning to that. But we all know we still have a long way to go, right? We're still transitioning, initiating our transition to that. Now, let's stop for a moment. Does it make sense now how astronomy and the Gospel of John interact with each other, right? By that statement, it was actually telling us that we have a universe, that we have many planets, that we have many places to inhabit, right? Here comes the question. All right, so what, Marcos? You gave us all this information, and so what? One thing that I would take from this is, the spirits also tell us we have 3 orders or levels of evolution, right? The imperfect spirits, the good spirits, and the pure spirits. If you were looking at those 5 levels of world, how would you actually put them against this? Challenging, right? I'll help you. So, the 3rd order, the imperfect spirits, are the primitive and trials and expiations, right? The regeneration is kind of like a transition where the good spirits are in the happy worlds, and the pure spirits are in the celestial worlds, right? So this gives us a map of where we are. This kind of shows us, right, how much I still have ahead of me in my spiritual journey, right? And let's say you live in a neighborhood that you're not too happy, right? You have high crime rate, you have bad schools, and traffic is horrible. You will aspire to live in another neighborhood, to look for another neighborhood, right? So if we see around us these trials and expiations, this is a mantra that I have. When I see something that upsets me, that makes me sad, right? In the news or in the street or wherever, I repeat to myself, Marcos, trials and expiations. Trials and expiations. It is like that by design. I am supposed to learn from this, right? And then I can say, what do I have to do to move to a better neighborhood? So, what do we do? Now what? Now that we learn all this, what is my action? What is my homework? How do we change that? Well, I'll give you 2 tips. First one, follow the gospel of Jesus. Word by word, to the teeth. His examples, his teachings. And the second one, follow the mantra of spiritism, which says that without charity, there's no salvation, right? So if I put the gospel of Jesus in my life, every day, in every action, and I become a charitable person, I change the world around me. I like to call it the tangible world, the world that I can change. Then I'm starting to pave my way back to, not back, but up to a better world, right? And I'm going to close this conversation with this message from St. Augustine, also in the Gospel. It adds another thing to your list of prayers, in a way, right? He says, at night, at the time of repose and prayer, contemplate that blue canopy and the immutable spheres that shine above your heads, and ask yourselves which ones lead to God. Ask Him for a regenerative world to open up to receive you after your expiations on earth. So not only I should be working daily on this, but I also need to speak it out, right? Spell it out. God, help me get there. There might be a world out there that I could go to after I go through my expiations on earth. And finally, this is my own invitation to you, right? Tonight, around 8 p.m., when it's all dark, I want to invite you guys to go outside, take a look at the sky and look at those stars with different eyes, with different understanding now. Now that we have all this information about the different worlds, different levels, that we have many dwelling places in our Father's house, that view will become much more interesting. It's already interesting, right? But it's going to become spiritually interesting for everyone. All right? Well, that's what I had. I hope I didn't bore you too much. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. Yeah? Thank you so much.